Picture this. 1959, the year the Mini was born, the year Hawaii became a state. And in a small garage in England, two blokes with a shared passion for cars were about to make history. Jem Marsh and Frank Costin. Remember those names? They're about to build some seriously cool cars. They called their company Marcos Engineering. They didn't have much money, but they had big dreams. They were like the rock and roll band starting in their parents' garage, except instead of guitars, they had welding torches. Now, most car makers back then were using steel for their chassis, heavy stuff, expensive stuff. But Marsh and Costin, they were different. They were pioneers. They used plywood. Yes, plywood. The stuff your grandma's shelves are made of. Light, strong, and cheap as chips. It was revolutionary. Their first car, the Marcos Xylon, had a sleek fiberglass body and that crazy plywood chassis. It was like nothing else on the road. The Xylon was a head-turner, low-slung with those cool gull-wing doors that made you feel like you were climbing into a spaceship. It was a hit at car shows. People couldn't believe it was made of wood. But it wasn't just about looks. This thing could move. It was light and nimble, and with a Ford engine under the hood, it could really shift. Marsh and Costin had proved their point. Plywood was the future, or so they thought. The Xylon got people talking. Soon, orders started trickling in. Marcos was off to the races. They followed up the Xylon with the Luton Gullwing. Another stunning car with those iconic doors, but this time it was a bit more practical with a back seat. Sort of. You could squeeze a couple of kids back there if you really had to, but let's be honest, these cars weren't about practicality. They were about style, performance, and that undeniable cool factor. Marsh and Costin were on a roll. They churned out a series of head-turning sports cars, all with that distinctive plywood chassis. They were winning races, turning heads, and putting Marcos on the map, but there was a problem. Plywood, as it turned out, wasn't quite as indestructible as they'd hoped. It had a tendency to, well, rot, especially in the damp British climate. Not ideal for a car. So they made the tough decision to switch to steel for their chassis. It was a blow, but it was the right move. And besides, they had something even more ambitious up their sleeves, something that would become a legend. The Marcos 1800 GT. 1964, the Beatles were taking the world by storm. Ford launched the Mustang, and Marcos, they unleashed the 1800 GT. This wasn't just another pretty face. This was a proper sports car, sleek, low-slung, with a powerful Volvo engine under the hood. It was the car that put Marcos on the map. The 1800 GT was a revelation. It handled like a dream thanks to its lightweight design and that trusty plywood chassis for the time being. It was quick off the Mark II and sounded like a Banshee when you put your foot down. It was a hit with both drivers and critics. It was also surprisingly affordable, making it a viable alternative to more established sports cars. The 1800 GT was a game-changer for Marcos. It cemented their reputation as a builder of innovative and exciting sports cars. But Marsh and Costin weren't done yet. They had another trick up their sleeves. Something small but perfectly formed, something that would become a cult classic, the Mini Marcos. In the world of motorsport, size isn't everything. Just ask the Mini Cooper. And in 1965, Marcos took the Mini's winning formula and gave it their own unique twist. The result? The Mini Marcos. This little pocket rocket took the Mini's mechanicals and wrapped them in a lightweight fiberglass body. It was tiny, it was fierce, and it was ready to take on the world. Now, Le Mans is not for the faint of heart. It's a grueling 24-hour race, a true test of man and machine. And in 1966, a plucky little Mini Marcos lined up on the starting grid, ready to take on the big boys. No one gave it a chance. It was outgunned, outsized, and out of its depth. But guess what? It finished. Not only did it finish, but it also bagged a respectable 15th place overall. Not bad for a car that looked like it could fit in your pocket. The Mini Marcos became a legend. It proved that you don't need a massive engine and $1 million budget to compete at the highest level. It's a testament to the ingenuity and determination of the Marcos team. They were David taking on Goliath, and they bloody well won. The Mini Marcos wasn't just a successful race car. It was a sales success too. People loved its quirky looks and its giant killing performance. It was the perfect car for the enthusiast who wanted something a little different, something with character. Section 5, Turbulent Times and a New Dawn. The late 60s and early 70s were, well, a wild ride for the car industry. Oil crises, strikes and changing tastes made life difficult for small manufacturers like Marcos. They soldiered on, introducing new models like the Mantis, a mid-engined marvel that showcased their engineering prowess. But the going was tough. In 1971, Marcos hit a major bump in the road: bankruptcy. It was a devastating blow, but Jem Marsh, the tenacious soul that he was, wasn't about to give up on his dream. He bought back the company and started again, this time focusing on selling kit cars. It was a shrewd move. It kept the Marcos name alive and allowed enthusiasts to experience the joy of building their own sports car. Throughout the 70s and 80s, Marcos continued to innovate, introducing new models like the Mantula and the Martina, keeping the spirit of the brand alive. The Marcos story is one of resilience, determination, and a never-give-up attitude. It's a story that proves that even in the face of adversity, passion and ingenuity can prevail. Section 6, The Mantis, a legacy reimagined. In the world of cars, some names just stick with you. The Mantis was one of those names. It first appeared in the early 70s, a wild mid-engine beast that got people's hearts racing. But it wasn't until the late 80s that the Mantis really came into its own. Jem Marsh, never one to shy away from a challenge, decided to revive the Mantis name for a new generation, and what a revival it was. This new Mantis was a proper head-turner, low-slung, aggressive, with curves in all the right places. It was like a wild animal, crouched and ready to pounce. And under the hood, a rumbling V8 engine that sounded like pure power. The Mantis was back, and it meant business. It was a car that turned heads wherever it went. It was loud, it was proud, and it was unmistakably a Marcos. But the Mantis wasn't just about brute force. It was a well-sorted sports car with sharp handling and a surprisingly comfortable ride. It was the kind of car that made you feel alive, that made every drive an adventure. The Mantis was a fitting tribute to the Marcos legacy, a car that embodied the spirit of innovation and excitement that had defined the brand from the very beginning. Section 7, Racing Spirit, From Tracks to Triumph. You can't talk about Marcos without talking about racing. It's in their DNA. From those early days, battling it out on the track with the Xylon and the 1800 GT, Marcos has always had a need for speed. They've raced at Le Mans, battled it out in the British GT Championship, and even had their own one-make series, the Marcos Mantis Challenge. Talk about keeping it in the family. Their cars might not have always been the fastest or the most technologically advanced, but they were always in the thick of it, fighting for every position with grit and determination. And that's what mattered. It's that never-give-up attitude that made Marcos such a popular underdog. People love a trier, and Marcos always tried. They raced with their hearts on their sleeves and their foot to the floor, and occasionally they even tasted victory. But for Marcos, it was never just about winning. It was about the challenge, the camaraderie, and the thrill of pushing man and machine to the limit. It was about living life in the fast lane and inspiring others to do the same. Section 8, A Winding Road, The Later Years. The road for a small independent carmaker is rarely smooth, and Marcos's journey was no exception. Despite their passion and engineering prowess, they faced their fair share of challenges. There were more ownership changes, financial struggles, and even another bankruptcy in the early 2000s. But through it all, the Marcos spirit endured. Like a trusty old race car, they kept on going, patching things up and finding ways to keep the dream alive. New owners came and went, each with their own vision for the brand. There were attempts to modernize the classic designs, to appeal to a new generation of enthusiasts. Some were more successful than others. But through it all, the Marcos name retained a certain magic. It was a name that whispered of hand-built British sports cars, of plywood pioneers and giant-killing minis, of roaring V8s and that undeniable spirit of adventure. The Marcos story is a reminder that the automotive world needs its mavericks, its risk-takers, its dreamers, because without them, life would be a lot less interesting. Section 9. The legacy of Marcos' innovation and perseverance. So there you have it, the story of Marcos. It's a story of highs and lows, of triumphs and tribulations, of plywood chassis and Le Mans victories. It's a story that proves that in the world of cars, passion and determination can take you a long way. Marcos might not be a household name like Ferrari or Porsche, but for a small company from a little village in England, they made a hell of an impact. They built cars that were different, cars that were exciting, cars that were a joy to drive. They weren't afraid to take risks, to innovate, to do things their own way, and that's something to be celebrated. The Marco story is an inspiration to anyone who's ever dreamed of building their own car, of defying the odds, of leaving their mark on the world. It's a reminder that even in the face of adversity, with a bit of grit and a lot of passion, anything is possible. So, next time you see a Marcos, take a moment to appreciate its unique blend of style, performance, and sheer bloody-mindedness. It's a car that embodies the spirit of adventure, the thrill of the open road, and the unwavering belief that anything is possible if you dare to dream. And that, my friends, is a legacy worth celebrating.